evening. My name is Andrea Becker. I'm the Executive Director here at Turner Hall, and I'm very excited to have you joining us for our Turner Talks series tonight. We have Leroy Harris from the New Ulm Public Library here to talk about a topic that is kind of very unknown to many people, myself included, which is artificial intelligence. And as an elected official that tries to attend conferences and stay up on some of the technology, I can tell you that the last couple of conferences that I've gone to have been very AI heavy, specifically the National League of Cities conference I went to 2 weeks ago in Tampa. I mean, they have so many like getting started toolkits for cities and different things, and I've learned so much about the ways that it's used. This has crept into our lives in a number of ways already, and you know, we may or may not be aware of some of the information that we're either consciously, subconsciously, proactively giving up about ourselves, and how that data is being used to kind of target what we think that we should do. And so one of the reasons that I picked this topic, well, number one is because it came up from some of our attendees. But number two, you know, going back to that sound mind and sound body, just making sure that we as, you know, Turners or people interested in this understand and are aware of this. You know, I'm very aware that when I talk about a certain type of cooking pan, and then 2 days later it's in my Facebook news feed, you know, that our phones are listening, or a certain toy that my kid wants for Christmas shows up. And so, you know, it's a scary thing, but we have to be able to recognize, you know, some of the ways that it's used in those senses and be aware and not let that direct us into who we are. Like it's still important to be free-thinking individuals. But there's a lot of good things that come out of artificial intelligence. So one of the things that I learned about is how they're using it to track stoplights in large cities to decrease traffic jams and set the timing to be more correct. How cities use that data to track, you know, using cell phone data to track the patterns of people and where they go and what they do. And so, you know, so there's different ways that it can be used in a good way, but it's something that we want to be more aware of. And so I'm very excited to introduce Leroy Harris, who has some information that he's going to share with us, and just a little bit. So please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Andrea. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to start with a couple caveats. Caveat number one is I am in no way an expert on AI. Caveat number two is if someone tells you they are, they're lying. And that's which leads us to caveat number three, which is that the reason why that's not possible is because artificial intelligence encompasses many different disciplines and fields. And so people can be an expert in one aspect of that, but nobody is an expert in all of the different fields that touch artificial intelligence and that are utilizing it to some degree. So to start us off, I've got some questions for us to consider. First, we're just going to talk about what is artificial intelligence. We hear this term used all the time, and there is a big disconnect between the public's general perception of what artificial intelligence is and what the people who are actually training artificial intelligence models know it to be. And then what can it do and not do, and that part will be a little bit tongue-in-cheek when we get there. How is it changing? Because artificial intelligence has rapidly changed in just the last 2 years. It's expanded and changed in many ways, and we'll talk about what has allowed it to do so. And then we're also going to talk about why is it controversial. Artificial intelligence, like any new technology that's a Pandora's box kind of a thing, it does not, it's not good or bad. It all depends on how you use it. But the problem is that with a lot of technological advances, once it's out of the box, we start using it before we often fully understand the implications of where that can go. And then we're trying to play catch up, especially legally and policy-wise, behind things that are already happening. So let's start with that first question. What is artificial intelligence? And it's not a new idea. Humans thinking about creating something that can think for itself is such an old idea. How many of you are familiar with the Greek myth of Pygmalion? Right? He's a figure, he wanted to give life to a sculpture he had made. So this idea of something that humans have created that we want to be able to act for itself, this is not new. Frankenstein, everybody familiar with the novel by Mary Shelley? A scientist sparking life in a monstrous creation. Early science fiction writers. And when I say early science fiction writers, people start thinking like 1950s. No, I'm talking there we go. Okay. I'm talking the 1800s. Writers like Jonathan Swift. If you're paying attention in Gulliver's Travels, the third place that he goes to is called Laputa, which is this very technologically advanced flying continent, and has machines that think and talk for themselves. Jules Verne and H.G. Wells are very well known by people. Edgar Rice Burroughs, most people know him for writing Tarzan, but his John Carter of Mars series, written in the very early 1900s, talks about artificial intelligence as well. So the Oxford Dictionary definition of artificial intelligence is the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. So I want to draw attention to that phrase, to perform tasks. Artificial intelligence isn't thinking, it is doing. It's something that is designed to perform a task, and that's a very important distinction. But when we talk about it, we talk about it by saying we're making a computer program that can think for itself. It can do the doing without us having to tell it to do it. And so that comes back to the idea of personification, which is, we do this all the time, in written form as well as in spoken form, where we like to describe objects as having human traits. And a lot of public perception related to artificial intelligence comes back to that idea of ascribing to a computer these human-like traits of thinking and feeling and perceiving, and that's not what the computer is doing at all, but that's how we relate to it because it's easy for us to understand things that are like us. And that desire to create and see ourselves in what we make. And today's artificial intelligence, like I said, it's not new. It's building on centuries of mathematical and philosophical works that were dedicated to describing how people process information. Back in the 1600s, people were already writing treatises on trying to describe the way we think, and not in a philosophical way, but in an analytical way. What is the actual process of creating a thought and making a decision? How people organize ideas, how processes are broken down into smaller steps. These are things that go into modern computing and computer coding quite a bit, but the foundations for these were centuries ago. We first get into the idea of a machine being able to do something on its own with early input commands for radio-controlled robots. So we see this happening in the 1930s. Of course, the word robot is coined from an early film in the 1920s, but the use of radio to send a command to the robot so that the robot could autonomously perform the function. This is the first instance where we have it acting for itself after just being given a signal. So in 1943, there was a book published, A Logical Calculus of the Ideas Immanent in Nervous Activity. That's a good mouthful for you. And this is the basis for neural networks, which is also called deep learning, and we're going to talk about both of those later. This is where we start to get into, okay, we've had these foundational ideas around for centuries, we've come up with mathematical principles for these, how do we actually apply these into an actual system where we're using machines? And so then in 1950, we have Alan Turing's famous Turing test, which is the idea of if you are interacting with the machine and you can't tell that you're interacting with the machine, if you think it's human, then that is the Turing test. And artificial intelligence first passed the Turing test somewhere around 10 years ago. August 31st, 1955 is actually the first time we see the use of the term artificial intelligence. It was part of a research proposal at a conference, and that's its very first use in its modern lexicon. Then after that point, we have classic science fiction writers such as Isaac Asimov, Gene Roddenberry, Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, that all started writing about this as a topic, writing about robots and machines and computers that could think for themselves. And one of the nice things about science fiction as a discipline and a genre is that many times science fiction becomes science fact because it propels the imagination. It inspires people to think about what if and could this be possible, and so people actually push towards a goal to make those things a reality because they enjoyed it when they read it. So in 1957, this was the first pattern recognition computer. So you could input information into it and it could recognize a pattern. And not just calculations, reaching conclusions based on a set of data. And so if you input into that computer square, triangle, triangle, square, triangle, triangle, square, then it could tell you what the pattern was. In 1972, we have Meisen at Stanford University. So this is 1972. You know, when people think about computers being quite large, which they were, and even at that point, it was a computer capable of identifying bacteria and recommending a suitable antibiotic. And so it was given a bunch of information, and then if you fed it a given input, it would, through the information it had, provide a recommendation based on the data that was in its memory bank. In 1980, excuse me, we have another foundational work, probabilistic reasoning in intelligent systems, and this is for building computer systems able to deal with uncertainty. So before this point, computers really were very straightforward in terms of I input A, I expect B. Or I create a chain command of I input A and computer executes B, which leads to C and D and so forth. The purpose of this work was to look at what if you give a computer information but don't tell it what path to take? How do you get the computer to select a path? And so this is where we start getting into that idea, you know, that public perception of it thinking for itself, is how do you get it to perform a task without telling it exactly what to do. And then in 1995, as the internet starts to expand, we have Alice, the artificial linguistic internet computer entity. And this was the first chatbot able to use natural language learning thanks to the growth of the internet. And so we'll talk a bit about bots later, but just very briefly, what Alice was able to do is you went to the website where Alice was located, and you can still talk to Alice, by the way, and as well as Alice's successors. But it was able to use its programming to scan thousands and thousands of web pages at the time. That was very fast at the time, in order to look at the way that we write, the way that words come together to form sentences, so that when you typed in a statement or a question, Alice could respond with something that was probabilistically correct. You weren't actually conversing with the computer. The computer was looking at your words and then trying to guess what would be the right words to respond with. So,
quick question.
yes.
You are sharing a lot of incredible information already, some of which I'm trying to write down. Might you be able to share this presentation so we don't?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would be more than happy to do that. That's all background to the present. And so now we want to talk about some key artificial intelligence terms that if you read any news articles about artificial intelligence, or if you go to a presentation about a particular artificial intelligence application, these are the things that you will want to understand so that you can really follow along with what is it that it is actually doing. And so the first thing we need to understand, so the US IT Centers for Excellence Government Office says this: AI combines three large disciplines, math, computer science, and cognitive science, to mimic human behavior through various technologies. All of the AI in place today is task-specific or narrow AI. This is an important distinction, as many think of AI as the general ability to reason, think, and perceive. This is known as artificial general intelligence, which at this point is not technically possible. So that's important for you to understand, is the computer is not thinking for itself and wandering off. It's been given a specific objective. Now, we're getting to the point where that objective can be much broader and much more loosely defined, which is leading to very unexpected outcomes, some good, some bad. But recognize that it is in no way a free-thinking, self-existent thing. It is still a very much programmed to perform a task. So our first term then is data science. Data science is the practice and methodology of implementing analytics or machine learning techniques with subject matter expertise to provide insights that lead to actions. That's a whole lot of words. What does it mean? So data science is basically the practice of you collect a whole bunch of information, whether that's surveys, whether they're records of medical data or financial data or sports data or whatever you would like to collect in large volumes of information, and compiling and organizing that information so that it is easy to search and read. That's what data science does. Is it takes lots and lots of information and makes it usable. So I mentioned the term machine learning. And so machine learning is the field and practice of using algorithms that are able to learn by extracting patterns from a large body of data. This contrasts to traditional rule-based algorithms, and the process of building a machine learning model is by nature an iterative approach to problem solving. Machine learning has an adaptive approach that looks over a large body of all possible outcomes and chooses the result that best satisfies its objective function. And so what it means is the overarching function for the artificial intelligence machine learning module that you're building, you tell it what it is you want it to be able to do in terms of commands. So for example, we talked about Mycin, which is able to identify bacteria in order to recommend an antibiotic. So let's say that's your baseline, is you want it to be able to see an image of a bacteria, or possibly be able to look at the DNA profile of a bacteria and recognize what that bacteria is and collate that information to what are the available antibiotics and which are effective against that bacteria. Now then you have to take that and you have to connect that to patient information. So it also needs to have all the information about dosages, about how much medicine of a particular antibiotic is required for a patient of a given age, body weight, etc. And so that when you input your query and say, okay, this is the bacteria that we've got under the microscope, and this is the patient, say 13-year-old boy, what do we need? And then the AI takes those, connects it to the large battery of data that it has, and it spits out an answer. Now, why it's called machine learning is because initially the AI program doesn't know the answers. when you input information and you test it, and you say, okay, I'm giving you this, and then you see what it comes up with, and then you tell it that is correct or incorrect. And so then based on that, and they do that thousands of times, to get it to recognize what is a correct answer, what is an incorrect answer, based upon the feedback from the human encoders. And that allows the machine to, in effect, learn the correct pathways for analyzing the inputs that it's given. So we'll talk about that a bit more as well. So a neural network is a machine learning program or model that makes decisions in a manner similar to the human brain by using processes that mimic the way biological neurons work together to identify phenomena, weigh options, and arrive at conclusions. So all computer coding at its very base goes down to zeros and ones, a binary. It's either a yes or a no, and fundamental base code. It's very long. Now, of course, we're getting into quantum computing. I'm going to take that tangent and throw it aside because we could derail the whole conversation talking about that. But 0 and 1s, on or off. The neurons in our brain fire off simplistically in much the same way. Either the pathway is active or it is not. And so the point of a neural network is designing the computer's pathways to mimic the way that our neurons communicate between the parts of the brain. So every neural network consists of layers of nodes or artificial neurons. There's an input layer, one or more hidden layers depending on how complex the task is, and then an output layer. And each node connects to others and has its own associated weight and threshold, meaning how important is it and how much information can it take. If the output of any individual node is above the specified threshold value, that node is activated, sending data onto the next layer of the network. And otherwise, no data is passed to the next layer. It says, that information does not go with this conclusion. And so different applications of neural networks, they're being used in the automotive industry, consumer electronics, national defense, telecommunications, cloud computing, intrusion detection, cybersecurity, space applications, medical devices. They're finding new ways to apply this way of training a computer all the time. And so there are 3 types of machine learning. So when we're training this AI application to do what we want it to do, there are 3 ways we can go about that. And the first is supervised, using labeled data sets to train algorithms to classify data or predict outcomes accurately. And so the information we give to the program is already labeled. It's told, this is what this information means for each piece of information that it's given. And then we test it to make sure that it is correctly identifying things as we've given it. This type of machine learning is really useful for image recognition, identifying spam messages, as well as for predictive analytics. How likely is something based on data inputs? And so whenever your email provider today filters out an email to your spam folder or your junk folder, it's utilizing supervised machine learning because the server has been trained to recognize keywords or certain types of email domains as likely being fraudulent. And so it diverts them from your inbox to your junk folder. Now if we got supervised, of course we've got the kid in the room who is unsupervised. And this uses unlabeled data to discover patterns that help solve clustering or association problems. So we have a problem, we're not sure how to solve it, we have a whole bunch of information, going through it will take us forever. Make the machine do it, which frees us up to do other things. And so you give it a bunch of information and in essence you've trained it to look for patterns. You've trained it to look for clusters, for things that stand out. And so Andrea earlier brought up, stoplights, right? This is a perfect example. You have a whole bunch of information about how long the stoplights are on and off, and when they're activated and whatnot, and at what times of day. You feed all that into the AI program, and an unsupervised AI would look at that and say, these are the stoplights that are most busy, these are the times of day that are most busy, these are the times of day when it's least busy, these are the ones that are the longest, these are the ones that are the slowest, and it can sort that out for you very, very quickly, because that's what you've trained it to do. So we've got supervised and unsupervised, and so it, some examples are recommendations based on information, medical diagnoses, pattern recognition, and data grouping, which we gave a great example. The last type is reinforcement, and this is similar to supervised learning, but the algorithm isn't trained using sample data. And so with a supervised machine learning module, you give it all that initially labeled data that says practice this, and then you teach it yes, no, correct, incorrect. With reinforcement, it starts from scratch. You tell it what you want it to do, and you just feed it information one bit at a time and say yes or no. And so then it builds up its own bank of correct and incorrect choices to figure out the most efficient way to perform its objective. And so reinforcement machine learning really applies in automation fields, financial predictions, translation, and text summarization. You can't teach a computer program to be able to write a bunch of text by just giving it a bunch of examples of text because it will just copy those or mix them up. And so when they train generative AI, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it's a reinforcement machine learning. They give it information and it learns to recognize the patterns on its own to be able to figure out how they fit together. So, broadly speaking, this is our nesting of where we're going. So we've talked about artificial intelligence, we've talked about machine learning, which utilizes neural networks, and then today's AI is getting into those inner three circles. Deep learning, generative AI, sometimes people use those interchangeably, and then large language models, which we will look at too today as we go along. And so as we get to what are the current capabilities of AI, we want to talk about, well, what can AI not do? And so here is my list of what AI cannot do. It's probably not what you expect. So it cannot accurately mimic human emotion. It cannot understand information outside its parameters. You might be with me so far. It can't be infallible. It is not always right. Absolutely not. It can't understand many cultural or religious context clues. Things that are intangible, that are difficult to describe or to cross-contextualize from culture to culture. It cannot understand the full complexity of interpersonal communication. And a big part of that is because it can't read body language. It can't read intonation. Those are things it can't do. And so as a result, it can't respond to how those affect the meaning of the words. If I say, that's a nice suit, that's very different from, that's a nice suit. The words are exactly the same, but the intonation completely changes the meaning, and AI can't pick up on it. It also can't be consistent. It's very common that if you're using an artificial intelligence tool and you can give it the exact same input and the answer won't necessarily be the same. It will give you a different output. And so, artificial intelligence is not good at consistent, repetitive tasks in that way. That's not what it's for. Okay, so that's what it can't do. Well, what can it do? It can use deception. There was a study that was just published earlier this year in which they taught artificial intelligence to play a game. And the task they asked it to perform was to win the game. They didn't give it any other strict parameters. They taught it the rules of the game and had it engage with human players in the game to do it in an online application. And what they found was that without being instructed to, it learned to use deception. That it learned that the way to win was to try to convince other players that it would do one thing when it was going to do something else. Or tell one player, hey, I'll make an alliance with you to do this, and then backstab them and tell a different player, they're going to do this, help me stop them. And so AI can use deception because it recognizes it as a tool to perform the task it's been given. It can make up information. You can ask an AI model a question and it can give you absolute nonsense. And even if it doesn't give you absolute nonsense, it can give you something that seems credible, but then if you actually check the answer for yourself, you find that, no, that wasn't correct in any way. And going right along with that, it can make up sources of information. If you ask it to provide you with sources, it can give you, a made-up reference page of studies that don't exist. Why? Because you asked it to. And so it just generates information. It can also be prejudiced because it's made by people, and people aren't perfect. We'll talk a bit more about that later. It can have political biases. It can reach incorrect conclusions. And it can also act without empathy or circumstantial differentiation. And this is a big one when we get later to ethical questions in several fields. So what is changing? There's this rapid growth in the last couple of years, and what has facilitated that? First is advances in memory storage. How many of you remember floppy disks? Right? Okay. So floppy disks, you were really excited if it could hold, 54 kilobytes, right? Super exciting. You can buy a flash drive that is 1 terabyte. You can get a computer that has a petabyte. Astronomically more space than previously because of advances in technology that allow more and more information to be crammed in the same amount of physical hardware. And so this allows machine learning models to have more information at their disposal for training. The more information you can give it, the more likely it is to be able to repeat the task successfully. Faster computing speeds. Everybody remember dial-up internet and the wonderful sounds the modem made. Faster computing speeds means that it can search through huge amounts of data much more quickly. We can physically give it more, and it can go through it faster, which allows these machine learning modules to be able to grow much more quickly, to actually learn things. And so here's our first looking at large language models. And I want to say it's not new for tech companies. Technology companies have been working with large language models for over a decade. But it is newly available to the public because the technology available to individual consumers is now caught up to what companies were capable of doing in large laboratories previously. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm hoping my links work properly. Oh, right, it does. So this is IBM's Large Language Model Lab, and we're going to come down here to how large language models work. And specifically, I want to highlight the second and third paragraph here. So during the training process, these models learn to predict the next word in a sentence based on the context provided by the preceding words. The model does this through attributing a probability score to the recurrence of words that have been tokenized, broken down into smaller sequences of characters. These tokens are then transformed into embeddings, which are numeric representations of this text. So it's
the next slide. I think you're off.
is it not? It's not showing the slide. Okay, so if I
Fix it.
let's see if it'll allow me to do it here. Okay. See if I can hear. There we go. There we go. Okay. So yeah, the second paragraph there. So basically, it's able to give words a probability score based on all of the words that it's seen before and the order in which they've been put. And so then it tries to predict what the next word would be. To ensure accuracy, this process involves training the large language model on a massive corpora of text in the billions of pages. So in order to train them to be able to write things, billions of pages. Larger memory, faster computing speeds, and just the sheer size of the internet is what makes this possible. Allowing it to learn grammar, semantics, and conceptual relationships through zero-shot and self-supervised learning. Once trained on this training data, it can generate text by autonomously predicting the next word based on the input they receive and drawing on the patterns and knowledge they've acquired. The result is coherent and contextually relevant language generation that can be harnessed for a wide range of tasks. Yes?
Yeah, you know, sometimes on your smartphone, if you misspell some words, then you go back, and all of a sudden they'll pop up something that obviously is what you want to say, and they get it right. That's kind of an example of what...
Yes, yeah. So autocorrect is a very common example of a large language model usage, in that it has read, without your permission, billions of emails.
Oh.
And when you go to write an email, it's read billions of texts. All of these without any consent on your part, you're not getting paid for it. That's another ethical concern we'll get to later. It uses that to figure out, okay, this is the context, the topic of the conversation. The person is saying this, what are they most likely to say next? So it's, kind of like going to a psychic and then trying to figure out what to do, except it's a psychic who has billions of pages of reference matter that it can go through in seconds. Okay. Back to... Here we are. Okay. So advances in computers in the United States have what have made this affordable and accessible. So previously only available to tech companies, now you have it in your pocket. And so now we'll get to the ethical concerns. And I'm going to pull up the whole list, talk through them, and then I have a bunch of examples of each that are all relevant. And so the first ethical concern is deceptively generated content, in which people utilize artificial intelligence to try to fool other people. And so this includes deepfakes, fake news, and bots. Probably terms you've heard thrown around in the news recently quite a bit. Deepfakes are, of course, creating video or audio that's made to look real, or at least try to anyway, to try to get you to think that something has been said or done that in actuality was not. Fake news is, in this case, in the context of artificial intelligence, is using AI to create fake news articles and to try to spread them. And bots are, artificial intelligence has made the replication of programming a bot much faster. So what is a bot? A bot is an automated interaction on the internet. It's something that is designed to respond to humans as if it were human, or at least pretend to be, with usually pre-scripted responses, because they want it to say very particular things. And so you see them pop up in social media all the time. They also show up in comment sections on websites, and artificial intelligence allows these bots to be much more sophisticated, because the way that they can respond can become more human-like, and so you think that oh, all of these people commenting on this post say this about it, so that's how a lot of people must think about this issue. In actuality, not a single one of those are actual real people. And someone is trying to get you to think that, the majority of people perceive a topic in a certain way. And so it can be very deceptive. Schoolwork and plagiarism. Students are thinking, I can get the computer to write my homework for me. No. No, you can't. Very basic questions, yes. But if you wanted to do something complex or anything that shows any sort of higher level thinking, the AI is not there yet. And it can be very easy for professors and teachers to recognize, and they also have tools that allow them to take text from your digital file and input it into the tool, and the tool can tell if it was generated using that predicting next word model. Plagiarism. So AI models are trained on vast amounts of data. They don't always have permission to use that information from its original source. And being an AI tool, there's no way as it writes a generated answer that it can attribute every single thing that it has looked at in order to predict that bit of text. And so it pulls from many copyrighted works and many things that might be considered personal or private, depending on the person in the situation. And so as a result, there's a big question right now is AI content, if used to, if you use it to create something in order to make money, is it plagiarism? Government censorship, surveillance, and propaganda. Artificial intelligence is making it much easier for governments to spy on people and identify people that they think are a danger to the state. China utilizes this very well, but because AI tools are becoming much more available and advancing rapidly, even small dictatorships in parts of the world that the American news rarely covers are able to now use AI tools to help them to control their populations. Replacing human connections. It's been talked about in the medical and psychological field recently, the idea of a loneliness epidemic. That a disconnect, neighborhoods aren't as connected as they once were. Young people having difficulty with interpersonal communication, and artificial intelligence has unfortunately been used as kind of a pacifier for people who are lonely, in that it gives the appearance of interaction, but without real connection. And that has consequences that we're not entirely sure of yet. Copycats and intellectual property theft. Artificial intelligence, especially for the creative arts. If we think about visual arts, music, things like that, many of the artists and composers and so forth in those fields are understandably concerned about artificial intelligence taking and using their work and people making money off of that. Cyber attacks, fraud, and cybercrime. Criminals are getting on the AI bandwagon just as well as anybody else. And so they utilize artificial intelligence to make cyber attacks more pointed and accurate in which systems are most vulnerable. AI is used in fraud all the time now. Internet scammers, phone scammers, artificial intelligence has made it a lot easier for them to try to trick people.
Wasn't that when all of those cell phones blew up? Was it in Lebanon?
Yes, so that was a use of artificial intelligence on the part of Israel as a, once again, government using it for, in this case, a military application of sabotage, right? Cybercrime, using artificial intelligence to try to either crack passwords or create fake identification to gain access to sensitive information. A lot of different things. Mentioned it earlier, bias and discrimination. So you think about supervised machine learning in which it is doing image recognition. There's been a lot of discussion about the use of facial recognition software, which uses machine learning to try to recognize things. And depending on the faces that it is trained on, it can have a hard time distinguishing faces that are very different. And so that can create unconscious bias within the model of the artificial intelligence. And it can preemptively either focus on individuals or dismiss individuals that really should be included in whatever the task that's being done is. Medical misdiagnosis. Artificial intelligence has tremendous implications for helping the medical field, but as mentioned earlier, it's not infallible. It makes mistakes. And one of the biggest problems with medical misdiagnosis is that a mistake by AI in this context can have a much wider variable of effects than, say, a student working on a homework assignment. If the student gets if the AI gets the answer wrong, the student gets a bad grade if the teacher doesn't catch it, right? But medical misdiagnosis, misdiagnosing a cold is one thing, but misdiagnosing cancer, there could be a wide range of possible consequences for that. And so that's something that is being looked at. And then lastly, at least for today anyway, mental health issues. Because artificial intelligence is trained to probabilistically predict what you want to hear. There are cases where it's been used therapeutically to some usage, but there are also cases where it has caused really big problems. And we're going to look at one specific example. In fact, let's start with that one. There we go. Okay, so this gentleman, Jaswant Singh Chale, he in 2021 broke into Windsor Castle with a crossbow and said he was there to assassinate the Queen. He had been suffering from mental health issues for quite some time, and he had gotten himself an AI chatbot companion who reinforced his delusions and encouraged him to act them out. And so it made the problem way worse. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at time here. Let's start with the deepfakes. Yeah, I gotta start the presentation. There we go. Perhaps. Okay. It's a bit of a roundabout here.
Seems to me your deep fakes, fake news, that really played a role, likely, in the last election.
In the United States, not as much. I can tell you where they had a huge role in the last election, India. India is the country that has the most AI-generated content at the moment. It's the second most populous country, and it's been actively embraced by all political parties in India. Deepfakes in India have been used to, in effect, resurrect dead politicians from their parties, taking video and audio clips and training them to create an AI-generated video or audio to make it look like these people who were beloved political figures are giving their support to current party leadership, or calling you on the phone and saying, remember to vote for this party. They were used widely in the Indian elections this year, and just everywhere. And mostly in that kind of positive, promoting ourselves way, but there were some that, yes, were used to try to make somebody else look bad as well. But if I can get this to actually do what it's supposed to here. No, not yet. The wonders of technology. Okay. That one. Okay. There we go. So this is a report from the Department of Homeland Security. It's 43 pages long, so we're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to take a look at the abstract at the beginning of why this report was written. Deepfakes, an emergent type of threat falling under the greater and more pervasive umbrella of synthetic media, utilize a form of artificial intelligence machine learning to create believable, realistic videos, pictures, audio, and text of events which never happened. And so if we go down to the bottom there, in line with the multifaceted nature of the problem, there is no one single or universal solution. Though elements of technological innovation, education, and regulation must comprise part of any detection and mitigation measures. In order to have success, there will have to be significant cooperation among stakeholders in the private and public sectors to overcome current obstacles such as stovepiping and to ultimately protect ourselves from these emerging threats while protecting civil liberties. And here's where we get to that dance of the technology is already out there, and policy and law have to try to catch up to things that are already having consequences. And how do you do that in a responsible way? Okay, I think I can. There we go. This is a bit. All right. So we talked about using AI to create fake news articles. Here's some statistics for you. In June of 2024, there are now more fake news sites than real newspaper sites. So in June, we crossed that threshold. Let's see some more fun statistics here. Here we go. In May of 2023, Media Watchdog organization found 49 sites that it was able to define as unreliable AI generated. And in February of 2024, so in less than a year, that 49 had grown to 700. Creating a website has never been easier, and with the help of AI, it's even faster. What used to take, if you had a team of a dozen people, you could create a pretty good website in several days, if that's the only project they were working on. AI can do it in minutes. And make it look relatively believable if you're not paying attention. And, it's driven in part by opportunities for people to make money off of these things. Of the top 100 digital advertisers, 55% of them had their ads placed on disinformation websites that were AI generated. And so, advertisers pay money for advertisements to show up on different websites, and the websites get a cut for hosting that information based on the web traffic that they get, the number of people that visit the site, at a given hourly rate or daily rate. Then the advertisers will pay them more to have their ads prominently displayed. These advertising companies aren't vetting these websites. the websites basically put in a widget block for advertising, pay an application fee, and they're making revenue off of fake content. Now, chatbots have been around for a long time, and the idea of creating a computer program to respond to text input. But they have really come into more prominence with the growth of these large language models, because it's allowing a lot of dating websites to generate fake traffic by creating fake women. And a lot of these websites, have ties to organized crime and human trafficking. And so 20 years ago, instead of using an AI chatbot, it was some kidnapped woman who'd been human trafficked, being forced to pretend to be in love with you on the dating website. And now, instead, they create fake women using artificial intelligence. But remember, this generative artificial intelligence is based off of real people, right? There's, a tangent to this is the pornography industry, which has utilized artificial intelligence to try to get around child pornography laws by saying they're not real kids. Well, the problem is that the AI is trained on real images, and so it's creating fake kids off of the victimization of real kids. And so there's a whole can of worms here. But there are many people, men and women, that have been scammed by artificial intelligence romance interests, either through dating apps or through text message, many different ways. We've come a long way from the Nigerian prince asking you to, send him money so he can send you more. Those still happen, of course, but artificial intelligence has made the scamming much more sophisticated. Okay, diving into the abyss of Reddit, which has been around for a very long time. Reddit is a community forum that prides itself on free speech, so it does not censor hardly anything. But there are sections within Reddit where people can, it's divided by topics. And so there's a section here called Ask Professors, and someone asked, is the use of AI for assignments really that common now? And so actual professors and teachers responding, we'll take a look here. I work with AI quite a bit and practically end up advising faculty on AI cases. What I'm seeing is that AI use is rather more transparent than many students evidently thought it would be. It's really easy to identify. What's more, AIs like ChatGPT aren't quite capable of doing a lot of the better assignments that assess student learning against higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. In fact, the hallucination problem hasn't gotten any better, but students don't know they're handing in silly work supplied by AI. Another professor said, yes, it's that common, at least for me. I've confronted 3 students about using it this semester, and they all admitted to it. I went so far as to say that if I have substantial reason to believe someone uses it on the final paper, they get an automatic 0, and I reserve the right to fail them. I said point blank, I'm interested in their ideas, and I'm fine with reading something that isn't eloquent or perfect, but I have 0 interest in wasting my time reading AI drama. Okay, plagiarism. So this is the University of South Florida's guide to being able to use AI in your homework, do's and don'ts. It's out there, and so some educational institutions are proactively saying, this is what it's okay to use it for, and this is how you have to cite that you used it, right? Treating it as another technological tool. Plagiarism, defined as the act of using someone else's work or ideas without giving proper credit or attribution. Since chatbots generate new text in response to prompts, using material could be considered more like ghostwriting than plagiarism. You're in effect getting the tool to write it for you. You're not directly copying someone else's words. But Some scholars have proposed modifying the definition of plagiarism to focus less on the concept of theft and more on the intentional or careless lack of acknowledging one's sources. So it's not so much as stealing someone else's ideas as just not telling you where those ideas came from. And we see here that there are people that are wanting to change the legal framework in order to deal with the issue of artificial intelligence. To help things load faster, I'm going to close some of these. Okay. So Freedom House every year releases a report on freedom of the net. They look at how free, civil liberties-wise, is the internet across the world each year. And their key findings from their 2023 report: global internet freedom declined for the 13th consecutive year. Attacks on free expression grew more common. And here's the two we're interested in. Generative artificial intelligence threatens to supercharge online disinformation campaigns. At least 47 governments deployed commentators to manipulate online discussions in their favor during the coverage period, double the number from a decade ago. Meanwhile, AI-based tools that can generate text, audio, and imagery have quickly grown more sophisticated, accessible, and easy to use, spurring a concerning escalation of these disinformation tactics. Over the past year, the new technology was utilized in at least 16 countries to sow doubt, smear opponents, or influence public debate. AI has allowed governments to enhance and refine their online censorship. The world's most technically advanced authoritarian governments have responded to innovations in AI chatbot technology, attempting to ensure that the applications comply with or strengthen their censorship systems. Legal frameworks in at least 21 countries mandate or incentivize digital platforms to deploy machine learning to remove disfavored political, social, and religious speech. AI, however, has not completely displaced older methods of information control. A record 41 governments blocked websites with content that should be protected under free expression standards within international human rights laws. Even in more democratic settings, including the United States and Europe's, governments considered or actually imposed restrictions on access to prominent websites and social media platforms as an unproductive approach to concerns about foreign interference, disinformation, and safety. So, okay, placing human connection. Jumping of advertisements. Okay, here we go. The concept of AI companionship, it's not new, but its realization in practical applications is a relatively recent development. These AI companions are designed to provide emotional support, companionship, and in some cases, even mimic romantic or intimate human relations. So some of the big ones out there, Replica, Gatebox is a holographic one, so it pops up a holographic projection of your companion in your home. It sends you messages, talks to you, and then a bit more controversial, Harmony by Real Doll is an actual robot built with artificial intelligence. And so here we go. So why are people turning to AI for companionship? Reasons are very varied. But they offer a semblance of connection for those who feel disconnected from human relationships. AI relationships provide a level of convenience and control that is not always possible in human interactions. These digital companions are available 24/7, don't have their own emotional baggage, and can be switched off at the user's convenience. Right? And advances have enabled these digital entities to appear more human-like in their interactions, from remembering past conversations to mimicking the display of empathy. They can simulate many aspects of human interaction, making them more appealing as social partners. So it's a tailored relationship with apparently no downsides except the fact that it's not real. Specialists in AI voice cloning technology conducted a survey to discover which celebrities would be most at risk of AI voice cloning. Arnold Schwarzenegger topped the list because of how distinct his voice is. Almost 40% of people said Donald Trump's voice because of there's so many clips available for you to train an AI model on it. While almost 1 in 4 thought Kim Kardashian, Morgan Freeman was the most popular choice for voice assistant technology. So if you want your phone to talk to you, people are like, I want Morgan Freeman. The issue is that there are so many audio clips of these actors and public people out there that with current AI tools, it would be very simple for someone with the right hardware in Africa to create an AI voice app, train it on these celebrity voices, sell the application far away from the United States and the United States copyright laws, and be making money off of it because, hey, US media and entertainment is all over the world. And these actors can't do anything about it. Okay. So this is the only video I have. I thought it was very poignant. So these are 2 voiceover artists, and they were listening to a podcast and heard their own voices. Oh, of course. Advertisements.
This Giving Tuesday, your gift will help achievers do all this and more. Donate to Doctors Without Borders today.
A tech company stole our voices, made clones of them as AI clones.
It's as loud as it gets, unfortunately.
Thousands of times.
This is Paul and Linnea, voiceover actors based in New York City. Last summer, they were in the car listening to a podcast about the Hollywood writer's strike and how it might affect VO artists like them when something strange happened.
In this specific episode, the host was going to interview an AI entity about the potential harm that AI will have in the entertainment industry. And he is interviewing my voice.
Good morning. Is it okay with you if I call you Poe?
Absolutely. Billy, feel free to call me Poe. As a generative AI technology, how disturbing and terrifying that moment was hard to articulate.
I spent 6 hours on the internet that night, searching as many text-to-speech products that I could find and listening to all of the voices that they offered until I stumbled upon Logo.
Logo are this company, a Berkeley-based text-to-speech platform. Just type what you want to hear.
And one of dozens of synthetic voices like this one. Or maybe this one.
Or this one will read it back in a matter of seconds.
But once she started poking around the company's site, Linnea said she found an AI voice that sounded just like Paul.
I mean, I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. And out of pure curiosity, I just started listening to the other voices, thinking maybe I'll recognize someone I know, a colleague from the voiceover world. And that's when I stumbled upon my voice.
So in May, Paul and Linnea filed a class action lawsuit against Logo, saying the company illegally stole their voices and identities without permission or proper compensation. The company has not yet filed a response.
Okay.
So how did this even happen?
Okay, so that's as far as we'll go because we've talked about how it gets information and data and so forth. But I think that would be pretty unsettling if your profession is using your voice and all of a sudden you hear it being used in that way. Okay. So this one is specifically talking about how cyber attacks can be used to damage AI-assisted systems. And so artificial intelligence, as we talked about, is creeping into many different aspects of our life. One of the biggest aspects that you can see is how it's being used in cars. What would it take for an internet-connected car to be hacked to cause the AI's inputs to incorrectly read, so that it thought that the road is going this way, but in fact it's going the other political assassination, mass terror incidents, take your pick. What happens if you have a very large, complex urban water supply system that uses artificial intelligence to manage flow rates, and it's told to change those flow rates and say that this is the normal, and all of a sudden you have flooding, ruptured pipes, backed up sewage, and all the things that come with that. The electrical power grid in the United States is woefully underprepared for that kind of cyber attack. Okay, so a British company created an AI-powered scanner that it said was able to detect any weapon that could be concealed beneath clothes, and used that as an advertising point to sell it to schools and other places that needed security scanners. The BBC did an undercover investigation and found, well, no, it regularly missed pretty dangerous weapons, and so the U.S. government is suing this company for false advertising and the possible harm it could have done. Okay, the New York City Consumer and Worker Protection website. As technology progresses and our world changes, consumers must keep up to date with the newest types of scams that may target them. One type of scam uses artificial intelligence. Scammers can impersonate your family and friends using AI technology to ask you for money or personal information. Okay, so once again, voice cloning technology. It used to be that if you listened or watched media, you only saw people that were professional performers or presenters. The internet has changed all that. Anyone who has a social media account or a video streaming website account and their content is public in some way, someone can copy that content and use it to create the information needed to impersonate that person. And this is especially dangerous for young people, teenagers and young 20-somethings at this point, who oftentimes don't understand the consequences of their use of technology and of posting things on the internet. That once it's there, they can't take it back, and it can be used against them. A very common criminal refrain of this kind is a grandparent being contacted supposedly by a grandchild who says, "I'm in jail, I need you to help me out and send me money. I've been in an accident, I need you to help me in such and such way." And of course, like all of these scams, their goal is to get you to panic. They want you to impulsively act and to not think it through. And so now they've added a new layer of emotional manipulation by using a voice that you're familiar with to try to get you to think it's them. So if that happens to you and it sounds like someone ask them personal information, because the AI can mimic the sound of the voice, but it doesn't have their memories. Ask them something that's not public knowledge. Hang up the phone call and call their actual phone number, not the number that called you, because one of the tools that's readily available for scammers now is called masking, which allows them to make their phone number look like a different phone number on your caller ID. They can make it look like your bank. They can make it look like the IRS, what have you. And so, yes, they can make it look like a family member. Okay, so Chapman University. So just real quick, these three sections here. So stages where bias can occur. So when they're creating a large language model or any sort of machine learning AI tool, there are 4 places where unconsciously or on purpose, bias can be introduced by the humans creating it. First, in the data collection. What data you input affects what it thinks is normal. Right? Data labeling. How you label things affects the way it thinks about those things. or organize them, I should say. In model training, if it's only trained to handle a particular type of input and you give it something that's vastly different, it views that as an error. Or deployment. If when it's being tested and actually put out on the market, if you don't give it the opportunity to look at different things, it can have problems. So of course there's implicit and explicit bias, and types of bias in AI. Selection bias, this happens when the data is used to train it, is not representative of the reality it's meant to model. So if you've got 3 people in a company who are tasked by the boss to build this AI model, they're given all the hardware to do it, but the only people they're given available to train it on are themselves, that AI then is limited into what it thinks humans are like based on those 3 people. Okay. Confirmation bias. This type of bias happens when an AI system is tuned to rely too much on pre-existing beliefs or trends in the data. So just because it's happened this way in the past, the AI will think that that's how it will always happen. When in reality, chance, luck, probability, all sorts of things happen that are unexpected. Measurement bias. It occurs when the data collected differs systematically from the actual variables of interest. We see this a lot with climate models. A lot of climate models are very doom and gloom, and the reason why is because they do not take into account the myriad complexity of variables that they haven't been collected into one database for an AI model to use. And so they can often be very simplistic and give judgments based on a limited set of data that does not account for all the information that affects a given place. It's what makes meteorology so challenging, is you are guessing based on the limited information you have. Stereotyping. This happens when an AI system reinforces harmful stereotypes. And so when it's given, instead of given individual variables to train on, it's given a representative type to say, all of this general thing is this specific thing, which can be bad in the medical field, it can be bad in the security field, lots of different ways. Outgroup homogeneity bias. And this happens, it's less capable of distinguishing between individuals who are not part of the majority group in the training data. Misclassification or inaccuracy when dealing with a subset of data that is very unlike the main set of data. So for example, if you've trained it on identifying tumors, but most of the tumors you've trained it on are harmful cancers, and then all of a sudden it's shown a benign tumor that's not cancerous, it might misidentify that because it thinks that most things are going to be harmful. Okay, we'll skip the other 2 because I want to actually show you some AI and see how it works. So ChatGPT is a large language learning module. What should we ask it?
Who's going to win tonight, Detroit Lions or Green Bay Packers?
All right, that's good because that's a predictive question, right?
There's only one game tonight.
Okay, it's between the Packers and
Detroit Lions.
okay. So it's not trained to predict things.
What did it say?
It says, "It seems like I can't do more browsing right now. Please try again later." Right? So, yeah, this is a great example of where it breaks down because that's the type of question it's not trained to respond to. We're not asking it to feed us back information that's readily available. We're asking it to synthesize and predict information based on other factors, and that's not what ChatGPT is for. They have very specialized AI models for that in the NFL and in other major league sports, but that's not what ChatGPT could do, and so it gave us an error, right? What's another great question?
Write me a poem about Turner Hall.
Okay.
In New Ulm.
Do we want it in a particular style?
Nope. I just want to see what pops out.
All right. It doesn't do poetry very well, I can tell you that right now. Okay. Turner Hall stands with history tall, a timeless gem in New Ulm's heart, where echoes of the past still call and stories old and new impart. From dances grand to voices bright, the hall has seen both joy and tears. Its wooden beams, bathed in soft light, hold memories from bygone years. The clinking glasses, the laughter shared, the scent of meals, the warmth of cheer. In every corner, souls have cared, uniting people year by year. A place of pride, of heritage deep, where German roots are honored still, where past and present softly meet, and dreams are sparked with lasting will. O Turner Hall, a legacy true. Your walls have witnessed hearts that soar. In New Ulm's embrace you will renew the spirit of the days of yore. That was not actually too bad. Right? That was not bad. That was not bad.
So was that made up, or is
Yes,
that
that's made up.
printed from somewhere else?
That is made up. That is generated. Just now. And so it's taken information from billions of poems that it's read, and it's taken information that it has available about Turner Hall, and it's tried to synthesize those together, and it's created this. So, interesting, right?
Yeah.
What's another question?
Write a Christmas letter.
Write a Christmas letter?
Yeah.
Okay. The more factors we give it, the more specific and accurate it will be, and so the more general the question, the crazier it'll get. That's it. Let's see what it does. Okay. Dear blank, as the holiday season wraps us in its warmth and joy, I wanted to take a moment to reflect on the year gone by and share a little holiday cheer with you. It's been a year full of highs and lows, laughter and challenges, and through it all, I've been reminded of the importance of love, family, and friends, people like you. It's so generic, right? This time of year always feels special, not only because of the twinkling lights and the aroma of cinnamon and pine, but because it's a time to reconnect. Whether it's through a quick phone call, a handwritten note, or just a warm hug, I cherish every moment spent with loved ones. And though the world feels a bit busier than usual, the Christmas season encourages us to pause, reflect, and take stock of the blessings in our lives. As we approach the new year, I can't help but feel hopeful for what lies ahead. There will be new opportunities, fresh adventures, and more memories to make, but no matter what 2025 brings, I know that with the support of family and friends like you, we can handle whatever comes our way. May your holiday season be filled with peace, love, and moments of true joy. Here's to laughter, warmth, and togetherness this Christmas, and to a new year full of new beginnings and unforgettable moments. Wishing you all the magic of the season, a bright year ahead with love and gratitude. So, extremely generic. There is no actual information there. There is nothing about you. There's nothing about your life. There's nothing specific there. It's very formulaic, right? It can create great flowery language, and this could be a great starter for you to embellish with your own words, right? But it's not very personable. Okay. Okay, so now I'd like to look at another one. So we're going to look at one called ToolBaz, which has a number of different components to it, but it's a story generator API, which is an application programming interface, meaning it's embedded in a website for you to utilize. Okay, we want it to write a story. What do we want it to write a story about? Terry, can you give me an idea? It could be anything. I tested it earlier by asking it to write a story about a hotel haunted by a giraffe. It was great.
The safety of travel to Vietnam.
Okay. And I think I gotta scroll down a little bit.
Don't go.
There we go. Okay, and we click write. Let's see what it does. And since it's writing a short story, and there are advanced options where you can tell it how long you want it to be, or if you want it to be in first person or third person, etc. So, here we go. In the heart of a bustling city, Leo sat in his favorite coffee shop, sipping a steaming cup of Vietnamese coffee. The rich aroma brought back memories of his travels abroad, and this time he felt a stronger pull than ever towards Vietnam. He had heard tales of its lush landscapes, vibrant culture, and history that enveloped you like a warm embrace. However, amid all these enticing stories, whispers of safety concerns often clouded his enthusiasm. We don't talk like that, exactly. It's utilizing words, and it's creating interesting expressions, but in a way that isn't quite natural. It's entertaining, and like I said, it can be a great thing to jumpstart your brainstorm, but using it as a finished product is kind of silly.
You can also ask for that in a different language.
Yes, yes. AI tools are expanding and advancing in other languages, especially ones that use Roman alphabet. And so French, Italian, anything that doesn't have a special character of some kind, it can usually write pretty well. Okay. Google Gemini is very similar, but we are very short on time, so we'll take a quick look at Accio, which is a very simple AI tool that is designed to just answer questions. So it doesn't create new things like ChatGPT does, it's just answering a question. Let's give it a very specific, obscure question.
How many people started walking their dogs this year in the U.S.?
Okay. All right, let's see if it can do it. Based on a recent study conducted in 2024 by the American Veterinary Medical Association, it estimated that approximately 8.4 million dog owners started walking their dogs for the first time that year.
No way.
I'm pretty sure this is made up. And so it'll answer the question,
Yeah.
but that's because it's designed to give you an answer. There's no way. And then it just pulled that out of thin air, right? Okay. In conclusion, artificial intelligence, like many other tools available to us, it's not good or bad. It depends on how you use it. And you can only really use it responsibly if you are informed and have a better understanding of how it works, and especially how it can work for you. And so I hope you've learned something in this very broad tour of the AI world. And thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak today.